wish you all a very happy. And we'll call on Deputy MaryLouMcDonald.
Every day is Men's Day. Right now.
Understanding Order 38, Deputy MacDonald.
You took me aback there, Karen Corlett. Goodbye, Taoiseach, the case of Harvey Morrison Sherratt, a child in need of spinal surgery, a child who was left to wait for years in agony, who died on July the 29th of this year, has been raised many, many times on the floor of the Dáil, and I raise his name again with you today. In the summer of 2024, Harvey was removed from the spinal surgery waiting list by CHI. In August of 2024, his parents found that out quite by accident, that he had been removed from the list, removed without their knowledge or their consent. And they fought really hard to get him back on the list, to get him finally the surgery that he needed. He had been left to wait for so long that his spinal curve had reached 130 degrees. Harvey suffered, his parents Gillian and Stephen suffered, and now they suffer the worst pain of all, having lost him. He was only 9 years old. Gillian and Stephen have consistently asked how, why, when Harvey was removed from the list, why his agony was extended and his treatment delayed. And they got no answers, only spin, only lies, only deception. Until a whistleblower from within CHI came forward with the truth. And the answer to Stephen and Gillian's question was sent to the Minister for Health in a protected disclosure on August the 31st and to the HSE on September 12th. But it had been known to many senior managers within CHI long, long before that. The truth is that Harvey, having been deemed fit for surgery following an assessment made by an outside consultant from Great Ormond Street Hospital on the 17th of May 2024, a decision was then taken just weeks later by CHI to remove him from the list and to describe his future care as palliative. The whistleblower has identified each step of this scandal, which left a small, vulnerable child to suffer and deteriorate. And this is just the latest episode, and I think the most devastating, in the failure of children with scoliosis and spina bifida, children who needed spinal surgery. Successive ministers for health, including Simon Harris and the current minister, have failed these children, and now is the time for accountability. Taoiseach, your government has failed at every level to get to grips with this scandal, from your failure to keep the first promise that no child would wait longer than 4 months for surgery, to your failure to deliver care and treatment to these children, your failure to give frank and transparent information. You see, it was widely known that Harvey was deliberately moved from the waiting list despite being fit for surgery. His parents didn't know, though. Nobody told them. They were left in the dark despite their pleas and protestation, despite meeting with the Taoiseach and the Minister for Health. They found out in a Sunday newspaper why Harvey was removed from the list. How can they or any other parent now have any trust in you or anybody else entrusted with the care and treatment of their children? Harvey was wrongly and deliberately removed from the list. Did this happen to other children? Taoiseach, is there now a commitment to deliver a full statutory inquiry to get to the bottom of this case and others? And what, Taoiseach, do you say to the parents of Mikey Henry Benson, a child in Mayo, who were told by CHI that there was no treatment for their children, to simply take him home and make special memories with him?
Taoiseach to respond.
First of all, I thank the Deputy for raising this very serious issue. And I have offered my condolences to Harvey Morrison Sherratt's family, to Gillian and to Stephen on previous occasions, as you have, and I do respect your commitment to the issue. And as I have said in this House before, no words of condolence or consolation to Harvey's parents are enough, because it's an enormous trauma for any parents to go through, but in these circumstances, even more traumatic in terms of the experiences that the family and Harvey have had with hospitals and the clinical world itself, and it is unacceptable. The government is anxious to help the family to find the answers to the questions that they have about Harvey's care. The Minister for Health asked for a multidisciplinary report on the chronology from CHI regarding their involvement in Harvey's care and the key milestones as recorded on the CHI hospital records. The HSE CEO received this draft report on the 19th of August and shared the report with Harvey's parents. The HSE CEO and the Minister have made it clear that they view this report as a draft until such time as the family have the opportunity to comment on and feed into the chronology and ensure any additional information they have is reflected in this final report, or in the final report. The Taoiseach and the Minister for Health met with Harvey's parents on September the 29th, 2025, and at that meeting there was agreement that there would be an inquiry and that the detail of it would be determined in partnership. Following the meeting, as agreed, the Minister for Health wrote to the parents on the 13th of October, setting out the range of types of inquiries available, and the Minister subsequently attended the AV room briefing, which indeed many members of this House here also attended, to listen to the requests being made. There will be a meeting today now between the Minister and the Taoiseach, following up on this, and the objective is to make progress on the nature and format of an inquiry which will be commissioned. With regard to the Sunday Times report on a protected disclosure being made to the Department of Health, I just want to make absolutely clear, Deputy, and I don't think it should be conflated wrongly, but I want to make it clear that neither myself, the Taoiseach, nor the Minister for Health had any awareness of this. This is a factual position, and it's not right or proper that in my view, that any other construction should be put on it. As we now know, any protected disclosure is investigated by an independent person, not by the Minister nor anyone else. The allegations, as you have outlined, are very serious and do warrant investigation. That is currently underway in the manner set out in law by the protected disclosure process. There is clear legislation outlining how protected disclosures are dealt with now. And I would accept fully and understand fully the distress, serious distress to the family who have been wanting to know for some time why Harvey was removed from the waiting list without any notice or discussion. And indeed in this House I have said myself, when it was alerted to me by the Deputy, I think next year, I said that's unacceptable. Every parent should be informed. You've made a point that he was deliberately removed. I don't know the circumstances. I don't know why would someone be motivated to deliberately remove the child from a surgical waiting list without telling the parents. That to me is something that's I can't comprehend.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And that does need to be the subject matter of an inquiry.
Thank you. Deputy MacDonald.
So, one of the fundamental problems here, Taoiseach, is that there has been a strategy or an approach of delay, deceive adopted with these parents in the case of Harvey. He was removed deliberately from the wait list. That decision was taken. That decision was taken despite the fact that he had been judged to be fit for surgery by an outside consultant. That happened. The Minister knows this because the protected disclosure arrived on her desk on the 31st of August and arrived to the HSE on the 12th of September. There is nothing legally to prohibit the Minister or anybody else in receipt to study and to absorb that protected disclosure. I am very glad that there will be a statutory inquiry. I hope that you get the terms of reference right. But I am deeply troubled by the fact that the system can act to deceive, to delay, to leave parents entirely in the dark, to leave small children to suffer and suffer and suffer, and there's never accountability. There's never accountability for this. As a matter of fact, the great irony is that the only person who has suffered within the system as a result of this is the whistleblower herself, and I raise that again on another occasion on the floor of the Dáil.
Yeah, Deputy, I think you've made a comment there in respect of the Minister receiving this, which is not correct, in the sense that there's a dedicated channel, a secure dedicated mailbox set up to receive protected disclosures via the ministerial channel. The Minister doesn't engage in that. The legislation is very clear on that. No, sorry, this was passed in the House. The legislation was passed. The protected disclosure was received in the mailbox, right, on the 31st of August. On the first, the notification sent from the department to the reporting person informing them that in accordance with Section 8. Well, you're not, because you gave an opposite perspective to that, and I didn't interrupt you, please. Forwards to the Commissioner for Protected Disclosures. The Commissioner for Protected Disclosures, who's responsible, acknowledged receipt on the 2nd of the 9th. Once transmitted, the Commissioner independently determines the appropriate prescribed person or public body to follow up on the disclosure. The HSE have issued a statement, as you're aware, and then Ministers are required to establish dedicated channels to receive protected disclosures and to publish information on how to access and use the reporting channel. Secure dedicated mailboxes set up to receive protected disclosures via the ministerial channels. Access to records is strictly limited to ensure that the identity of the reporting person and any persons named in a report are kept confidential to the greatest extent possible.
Deputy, please don't
All disclosures received by a Minister or Minister of State must be transmitted to the Protected Disclosures Commissioner within 10 calendar days of receipt. That's a statutory requirement.
Deputy Marie Sherlock.
The
you're way over time also.
I am, because
you are,
the Deputy was too, but it's not good enough that misleading presentation to be made by the Deputy. Let's not play politics.
Deputy, please, Marie Sherlock.
Taoiseach, the fate of hundreds of thousands of young people, of workers, of families, of those with a disability relies on what your government will publish in your new plan for housing tomorrow. It's not a dramatic statement to say that young people are leaving our shores, workers on good jobs, decent incomes have zero hope of being able to buy, workers of all ages condemned to a rental market with exorbitant rents, and thousands of families facing a very uncertain winter and new year because of your heartless changes to rent protections earlier this year. For too many, our country has become a place of luck, of when you were born, if you have a partner, and if your parents were able to help you with the deposit, in terms of being able to access a secure, safe and affordable home. Tomorrow, I have no doubt the government will try to dazzle the public with announcements of new schemes and funds and extra billions of euros. But Taoiseach, it is not a case of what you spend, but how you spend it. Your government has spent enormous amounts of money on the purchase of turnkey apartments that were originally designed to be sold on the open market. Not only is this a massive transfer to developers, it also squeezes out home buyers desperate to purchase a home. Last year, councils and AHBs directly built a paltry 335 new social homes, yet the public sector spent over €2 billion purchasing over 4,700 new units. They spent an average of $431,000 per unit, a whopping 24% increase on the previous year. Somebody somewhere is laughing, and it's not ordinary people out there desperately looking for a home. The Department of Public Expenditure and Reform itself admitted in 2023 that turnkey acquisitions were 21% more expensive than a direct build. Yet your reliance on private developers to bail you out of the social and affordable housing crisis has gone up, not down. In Budget 2026, you spent $270 million in tax cuts to developers in your latest wing and a prayer attempt to get apartments built. These are all massive transfers to developers. It makes a complete laughingstock of any claim to be value for money, and devastatingly, it squeezes the existing availability of homes for purchase that should be within workers' reach. And all the while, the Land Development Agency, the state's agency set up to get houses built, is moving at a snail's pace. Just 281 directly built homes to the end of last year. So Taoiseach, my question to you with regards to your housing plan is, will this government reverse course, prioritise direct building on the land the state owns? Will you ensure that for the people who are facing notice of termination, the over 4,700 people with notice of termination into this winter, will the government put in place an eviction ban? Because we know from the DAFT report today that the amount of rental properties is at an all-time low and they have nowhere to go.
Thank you.
Will you ensure that with regards to construction, labour supply and in particular apprentices, that this government makes good on the promise to pay them the national minimum wage as was promised by the Taoiseach 3 years ago?
Taoiseach, please.
Could I first of all say that I fundamentally disagree with the positioning of the Deputy in respect of the housing issue. And housing issue is the #1 priority facing our country, and particularly young people in our country. Progress was made under Housing for All, and the targets outlined in Housing for All were achieved, despite commentary to the contrary. Over 137,000 houses have been built since Housing for All was published, but 14 billion in terms of capital exchequer funding allocated. 59,000 households have purchased their first home through the Help to Buy scheme. That's people out there in the private market. 59,000. 8,400 more through the First Home scheme, which I understand you opposed. These are people, real people out there, who are able to buy their home because of access to the Help to Buy in the First Home scheme. And the percentage of drawdown of first-time mortgages has risen significantly to about 35% now, from about 23% in 2015. So there has been real activity in terms of enabling people to purchase homes, but it simply is not enough. And we have a lot more to do. There's no question about that. We need to get from 33, 34, 35,000 homes to 50 to 60,000 homes per annum. And that is the bottom line. And we need both the public sector and we need the private sector. And we also need unprecedented investment in infrastructure. And if you look in terms of the capital budget that we've, if you look at what we've now allocated to the public capital investment programme and the off-balance sheet procurement of finance by the state agencies, by the energy side, you're looking at about a 54 billion investment in transport, in energy and in water. And all of that investment will enable more housing. So there's a very structured, fundamental strategic approach being adopted by government, both on unprecedented money, public money going into the housing, in terms of unprecedented money going into the infrastructure that will enable more housing, and thirdly, to bring on board significant activity from the private sector to complement the work of the public sector. All of those strands are required to deal with the housing crisis. An eviction ban won't deal with the housing crisis. And measures that you've advocated in the past will seek to undermine any potential of any private sector investment coming in to the market. And we need private sector investment. It's estimated by the Department of Finance that we need about 20 billion a year to meet the required number of houses that we need. The state on its own cannot provide that 20 billion. So we need additionality to the public sector spend from the private sector as well. I know that you kind of disagree with that,
Deputy
but I
Sherlock.
see no proposals from you
Thank you, Taoiseach.
that would in any way
Sherlock
reach the 20 billion
respond.
to enable us to get to 60,000 houses per annum.
Taoiseach, what I'm hearing from you is that you're saying that Housing for All was a success, and yet we have over 16,000 people registered as homeless in this country. By any measure, your housing policies have been an abject failure. Yes, there are unprecedented amounts going into housing, but where are they going? They're going towards developers because of the acquisition policy by this government for turnkey acquisitions as opposed to directly building. And in terms of ideas, we have said many things with regards to housing. We've talked about the Land Development Agency expanding their powers so that they don't have to go by agency, but instead can compulsory purchase order on a bigger scale. We also talked about construction labour supply. We never hear any answers answers from your government about how to expand construction labour supply. We talked about a state construction company. We've talked about apprenticeships. I've heard nothing from you on that. And instead, what government all too often is throws its hands in the air and says, we can't get the workers. Well, we have brought forward proposals with regards to workers. We brought forward proposals with regards to how you secure those apprentices in the system, and you have failed in that regard.
Taoiseach, please.
Sorry, we've over 190,000 workers now in the construction sector, and I think that's up by about 45,000 since 2019. So there's been huge work done in terms of the human resource requirement for house construction. I was on the housing site last week in Ballyvolane and Cork. They're now building the houses within a 9-week timeline because of the infrastructure work that went in there originally about 2 years ago. Now the houses have been delivered. There'll be about up to 800 houses will be delivered on that site through timber frame and through modern methods of construction, utilising the Enterprise Ireland framework and programme. So there's huge progress being made, but it's not enough. Population has grown exponentially. We acknowledge that. We need to remove barriers and bottlenecks to infrastructural development, which we will. And we need your support on that. But what happens when we want to amend department guidelines? You guys judicial review it. Like, we need different types of houses, different sizes, different approaches to solve this issue.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Whatever you go, you oppose almost all of the measures, and what you offer there is it's very. There's no real substance what you offer there in terms of we talk about a new agency.
Deputy Holly Cairns.
The LDA will now have 8.5 billion.
Deputy Holly Cairns.
Gurmagat, Ceann Corda, and very briefly I just want to welcome my mum, Madeleine, to the gallery. It's extra special that she's here today because she's joined by some of her oldest friends, her childhood friends. You're all very welcome. Sorry?
I'm sure you didn't mean all. Some of her best friends. Welcome, very welcome.
Longest term. Taoiseach, in her inauguration speech yesterday, Catherine Connolly said that climate change is one of the greatest challenges of her time. President Connolly intends to make it a key focus of her presidency, and I really welcome that. This is especially important given climate change has fallen way down this government's agenda. I'm sure you'll deny that, but the facts are the facts. This government is on course to spectacularly miss its climate targets. Taoiseach, I read the speech that you delivered at COP30, and I have to say that I agreed with much of it. But I found it hard to square your climate rhetoric with your climate inaction. So you implored world leaders to, quote, tell it as it is, and told delegates that we, quote, need to go further, but then failed to admit that we have no hope of meeting our own climate targets. Your last government committed to a reduction of 51%, but then you made a plan that would at best amount to a reduction of 23%. On what planet is that in line with what you said at COP? Separately, in a recent discussion with John Collison, you suggested that some climate projects will have to be shelved because they risk polarising society. But you failed to outline which projects are going to be scrapped. So I want to give you an opportunity today to clarify those comments and tell us which projects aren't going to go ahead. Is it public transport projects, renewable energy, investing in native forestry, or what exactly are you going to scrap? Taoiseach, climate inaction is a missed opportunity for Ireland. We're a small country, but we could be a world leader in this area. Instead of scrapping projects and missing targets, we could be developing new technologies and championing green industries. We could turbocharge investment in offshore wind. We could actually protect our waterways. We could become the gold standard in sustainable agriculture. But this government is failing at all of that. Taoiseach, we see a lot of short-termism in politics, but this is the area in which it is most irreversible and therefore most unforgivable. Failing to take real climate action is a betrayal of future generations who will ultimately end up paying the price. Taoiseach, there will be a climate protest this Saturday starting at 1 p.m. in the Garden of Remembrance, and I would ask everybody who cares about this issue to please come out and make your voices heard, because this government is not listening and we're hurtling towards climate chaos.
Thank you, Deputy.
In advance of the protest, Taoiseach, can you tell us how you're going to get to 51%?
Thank you, Deputy.
And what climate projects are you going to scrap?
Can I first of all thank the Deputy for raising what is an existential question and issue facing humankind, and welcome your mother, Madeleine, to the Chamber, and her good friends as well, and hope they have a very enjoyable day. And may I take the opportunity also to wish President Connolly, as we did yesterday, the very best of success in her role as President of Ireland. And also, I fully concur with the objective of addressing the climate change issue. And I would say that sometimes, and I have no issue with being overly critical, I think the last government actually did engineer a step change in terms of government response to climate change. In terms of the legislative template that we have provided, which is very, very challenging, I do not doubt that, but also in terms of the range of initiatives from offshore renewables, across to EVs, retrofitting, better environmental practices in farming, utilising carbon tax revenue, putting it into legislation, utilising it for fuel poverty, utilising it for farming community to develop better sustainable farming methods, and indeed using it for the retrofitting programme, which has been quite extensive. Onshore wind energy provided 48% of Ireland's power last February, just to give an example. And last January, Ireland hit the important milestone of hitting 5 gigawatts of installed onshore wind capacity. Ireland is now ranked second in the world in 2023 in terms of onshore wind generation. You'll never hear the opposition acknowledge that. It's as if we are doing nothing. Like, huge strides are happening. A revolution has happened in terms of onshore wind. In terms of new technologies and innovation, you are correct, we need more. But we're seen as one of the best in terms of integrating renewables into the grid. And that's a good thing. The next big, in my view, move and step change has to be offshore wind generation. And we are pushing really fast, or as best as we can. I'll come back to this in a moment. I've established a clearinghouse, which means bringing industry in to meet with government departments in a committee structure to make sure we can remove barriers and accelerate the development of offshore wind, in line with the demapping and in line with proper procedures and so forth. Wastewater is very important in terms of a clean environment, water quality and so on like that. Yet we have so many people opposing wastewater treatment plants, some from the environmental sector. It beggars belief when you think about it. The objective being to clean the water before it goes into our rivers and into our seas. And yet we're interminable delays because of judicial reviews. And that is a factor. And I really would hope that when it comes to the offshore wind agenda, that we don't see objections to it. Because it is vital to the climate change agenda of this country, but it's also vital to emissions reductions, but also to less reliance on imported fossil fuels, which is driving up the costs and causing real challenges for us.
Taoiseach, there's so much spin in your reply, it's difficult to know where to start. We have less offshore wind production than we did 20 years ago. That's the reality. I recognise there was, the Climate Act was good, but it's about delivery. 51% was the target. You made a plan to reach 23%, and that didn't even happen. So the reality is that your government's record is one of abject failure. And when the Social Democrats try to point that out, your approach is to either basically to misrepresent our position, and that's especially true when it comes to, for example, the nitrates derogation. The fact is, we all know it, applying huge amounts of nitrogen into the land is damaging our water quality, and that's not my opinion, that's what the Environmental Protection Agency have said time and time again, and that's why it's going to be so difficult to retain the derogation. And pointing that out was, quote, sabotage, according to one of your MEPs. That's the way they bizarrely put it, when it's actually just a fact. So what is also a fact is that this government is leading farmers to a cliff edge. If the derogation is not renewed or is further cut, what are you going to do? So you didn't answer my question about whether you were going to reach the 51%, how you could get there. Maybe you can answer this question. What is the plan B for farmers when the derogation is inevitably cut?
Well, first of all, I've never said we'll be shelving any climate projects, but I did say we shouldn't attempt to litigate our way climate change, because we will divide society and we will develop a counter-reaction to changes that are required to meet our climate change targets. And maybe that was picked up, but that's exactly, and I've been saying this for quite some time. I think the legal route will be the ruination of the consensus that we've created in society around the need to tackle climate change. That's the view I have. And there are certain people out there who feel that it's all in the courts. And we'll drag them kicking and screaming through the court system. I can guarantee you that won't work. And in farming, it won't work. We have to bring farming community with us. A lifetime of involvement in the food production system. We have one of the most carbon efficient food production systems in Europe and indeed in the world. So the challenge is on the nitrates directive is to give us space and time to get it right, but not to undermine and ruin what is a very important industry to the country, but also to do it in a proper, effective way. And that is the objective, and that's what I've been doing in my discussions with the President.
I now call on Deputy Seamus
also
Healy.
In his discussions.
Thank you, Deputy Seamus Healy.
Sorry.
Taoiseach, I want to raise with you again the re-establishment of borough and town councils. As you know, local government is the heartbeat of democracy, and that heart was torn out of democracy with the abolition of town and borough councils in 2014 by the Fine Gael Labour Party coalition. These councils were replaced by committees with no powers, no functions and no funding, effectively talking shops. And this has done serious damage to towns right across the country. And it's now widely accepted and acknowledged, even by the former leader of the Labour Party, Brendan Howlin, that this was a very bad decision. Clonmel, one of the 5 original boroughs in the country, with a mayor and a form of local democracy going back to the 1400s, is a town very badly affected by that decision. Taoiseach, I acknowledge the programme for government's commitment to establish a local democracy task force and indeed the setting up of that task force. However, there are widespread concerns about the terms of reference of the task force. There's no mention of the re-establishment of borough or town councils. The composition of the task force is heavily loaded in favour of existing individuals and bodies connected to local government and local government management. There are no representatives, for instance, of community, tenants or residents organisations, no trade union representatives or indeed Chamber of Commerce representatives. The task force has limited its consultation process to requests for submissions from designated organisations. There's effectively no public consultation process. Taoiseach, if there is to be a re-establishment of town and borough councils and real local government reform, then this task force must be open, transparent and accountable and involve real public consultation. If this doesn't happen, your government's statement that local government is the heartbeat of democracy will mean nothing. Taoiseach, will you make sure that real local government and local democracy is in place with the re-establishment of borough and town councils and indeed new councils for towns that have grown and expanded over the last number of years? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy, for raising what is an important issue and one that's close to my own heart. I opposed at the time the abolition of town councils and boroughs. As a Democrat, I believe in fundamental layers of democracy, and I think the town councils played a very effective and impactful role in their day. First of all, they were a channel for people to get involved in community and involved in politics and outline plans and visions for their towns. And as you say, in Clonmel, all across the country, we have very good examples. Clonakilty, Kinsale, Dungarvan, they all were effective. Problem is when the system gets rid of something, the system have to be dragged kicking and screaming to re-establish. We have set up the task force because in the intervening period, what replaced the town councils was the area municipal districts, and so that is an issue that has to be factored into whatever we do. But I do favour, I would favour at least a pilot programme where we could look at certain areas of population of a certain scale where we could reintroduce councils. And because I think we talk about connection to people and we talk about democracy, the town councils were that connection. And indeed in flooding recent days, in some places where flooding took place, the absence of the town council and a basic administrative capacity was sorely felt over the last number of years in terms of resources being readily available in a given town if flooding occurred. But more importantly, it's a way of bringing people into politics at a particular level, and people can graduate onto councils or the Dáil subsequently. And it's about civic participation in society and in our community. I could never understand the negativity in some quarters towards councils. I was a bit frustrated when my good colleague, and I have great respect for former Deputy Minister Brendan Howlin, but as soon as he kind of left the department, he then had regrets about the decision. But that be said, you know, I think it's important that he did say what he has said, that he now thinks it wasn't a great idea. And that's important because that's somebody who's been through both sides of it. The task force is reporting, I think, next year in the first quarter. There has been stakeholder consultation. I take your point in terms of public consultation. We might ask the task force to have a look at that. It's examining structures, it's examining functions and the financing of local government. So I take on board the bona fides of what you're saying. Obviously, the report will come back to us and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Healy.
Thank you. Taoiseach, I appreciate the response and indeed I acknowledge and fully accept your personal support for the re-establishment of town and borough councils, and you've outlined that previously here to me in response to a question, and also you expanded that in a feature in the Irish Examiner shortly after that. However, Taoiseach, there is very serious concerns out there that the whole task force process is being controlled by insiders in the department and insiders in existing local government, and that we will end up with a proposal tinkering around with the edges, with no real reform, no re-established borough or town councils. And Taoiseach, I'm asking you to personally intervene with the task force to ensure that we see in the future the re-establishment of borough and town councils, and indeed the creation of new councils for towns that have grown and expanded over the last number of years. Thank you.
Taoiseach.
Could I just say that it probably would be an unfair characterisation to say that the task force is full of insiders. I mean, the Minister has just informed me that about 5 councillors are on that task force, nominated by the representative bodies of councillors. So I think there will be a serious, genuine, substantive look at the issue. It would then fall to government then to act on that report. And as I said, I would like to see, particularly in some newer areas as well, where there's been very significant growth in population. And then there are historic areas, you know, where people were very aggrieved at the removal of the borough council. But as I say, whatever happens has to be integrated into the area council format as well, or has to take cognizance of that. And that's something I'm sure the task force is looking at as well.
Taoiseach, and I now go to other members' questions. I call on